Okay. I guess I will begin. People are here more to see our panelists than to see me or describe different things about me or our organization. So as people come in, I think it's good that I do the introductions now. And we'll have our land acknowledgement a bit later. So hopefully we'll have people here by the time that we start that. I'm Neil Arya. I'm the chair of the Pegasus Institute, which is the host of this roundtable. Pegasus was developed from a series of biannual conferences that have taken place since 2014, seeking to address global health challenges through a lens of peace and sustainability. The Institute was developed recognizing the importance of ongoing work to advance global health, peace, and sustainability. We have a vision of a world where peaceful interaction provides for sustainable global health. Our mission is to promote equity, justice, and global health in its nexus with peace and environmental sustainability. So we engage in activities like the webinars and roundtables, publication of different information, supporting some research, policy, and advocacy, with academic publications, toolkits, community resources, and we've really developed a bit of a following within this first year of our activities. And we have upcoming roundtables and webinars that could interest people. Next Wednesday on greening healthcare, so September 29th from 6 to 8 p.m. And then October 19th, we have something on COVID vaccine access and equitable distribution. We'll have a number of people from different parts of the world, from the Solomon Islands, for instance, the World Health Organization's chief scientist. And you can find more details about these things on our webpage, pegasusinstitute.ca, and our social media. I wanted to begin by our acknowledgement that while we're gathering virtually here today, we acknowledge that each of us is on the traditional territory of many nations across Turtle Island. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples on the Haldeman Tract, land that was promised to the Six Nations, which includes 6 miles on either side of the Grand River. We offer this acknowledgement as a stepping stone towards honoring the original occupants, a testimony to the oppression faced by Indigenous peoples, and our commitment to creating dialogues aimed at addressing systemic injustice and equity that Pegasus engages in, such as this discussion today. We've had previous webinars on the impact of colonialism on Indigenous populations, addressed environmental racism, one on policing, mental health, violence, and racialized populations that you can find on our webpage. This session is also the launch of Canadian Afghans for Health and Peace, from which our speakers all come. And when we have the discussion period, we may have a few more people to share information with you. So this new organization is an interest group of Canadian volunteers committed to Afghans to improve health, settlement needs, and overall peace. So we're concerned Canadians who want to mitigate the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan and provide support for those impacted. Members come from a variety of organizations that bring various expertise in navigating immigration and settlement processes, addressing healthcare and education needs, and advocating for change. And our mission is to improve lives through advocacy and awareness raising, settlement support, health services, and psychosocial education, and promoting national reconciliation and a culture of peace. Pretty not so ambitious goal. And to further support the people of Afghanistan, both inside and outside the country, including those seeking asylum, going through settlement processes, and or facing other humanitarian challenges. This open forum will focus on urgent aspects such as challenges with information sharing on evacuation, immigration, and resettlement processes, mental health and peace building efforts, and develop strategies to optimize and safeguard the health and well-being of Afghan Canadians, their families, newly arrived refugees, as well as those fleeing Afghanistan to come to Canada. I myself came as an immigrant child of refugees at 1 month of age. My maternal grandfather came from the Afghan border area of Pakistan. At that time, it was India. He was born in Bannu. He spoke Pashto. I've been part of a Peace Through Health group at McMaster for the last 20 years that Dr. Weera may discuss. And I began a refugee health clinic in 2008 in Kitchener. And currently, we're seeing an influx of Afghans there. Our five speakers, I should say, include Senator Salma Atawalladjan, Chair of the Senate Standing Committee on Human Rights, committed to issues affecting women and youth in Afghanistan, and 4 Afghan origin physicians, Dr. Saber Pardes, the International Relations Coordinator at the Afghanistan National Public Health Association, who migrated to Canada in August, Dr. Sadiq Weera, who went from being a political prisoner for 4.5 years, opposing the Soviets, to work with the Afghan Ministry of Education when the Taliban was deposed from power, and in the last 2 decades has been promoting a culture of peace. He authored a textbook on life skills used in all Afghan schools after 2004 for a while. Dr. Kazem Hizbullah, a global health expert and member of the Ottawa Coalition for Afghanistan. Anushka Atawalladjan, who is with the U of T School of Public Health. So after this, we hope to engage with various academics, public health people, clinicians, policymakers, settlement workers, government officials. And as I said, after these prepared remarks of about 5 minutes each, I'll call upon a few other people to share things as we move more into that roundtable part from our group, and then we'll take some questions in the chat from the rest of you. So thank you for coming. And we'll start off with Senator Salma, who was born into a family with a long-standing history of political activism. She spent many years involved socially and politically in her community, moving to Canada from Pakistan in 1980. She was appointed to the Senate in 2010 and was the first Canadian senator of Pakistani origin. And she stands for ethnic diversity and the rights of women, youth, and the world's most vulnerable. She's been involved in various studies with her role with the Senate Human Rights Committee, and also concerned about children with their rights under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. So I'll just leave the senators to speak. Oh, you're still muted, sorry.
Thank you. You think after, what, a year and a half, I would have figured this out, but sometimes it happens, so I apologize. I'll start over. So good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today to exchange on the crisis in Afghanistan. I would like to thank the Pegasus Institute for inviting me to participate in this panel and to share my experience as a senator dealing with the Afghan crisis. As the first Canadian senator of Pakistani origin, my utmost concern has always been for women, particularly visible minorities. During my career at the Senate, I have visited many sites of disaster in an attempt to understand the context and underlying issues that lead to these horrific incidents. My observations have been communicated to the Senate Standing Committee on Human Rights, of which I was chair before the election. I have worked extensively with this committee to help promote women's rights. As a young child in Pakistan, there were few things I would look forward to more than a journey to Kabul. The Afghanistan of my youth was a laid-back, fun society where men and women were free to enjoy restaurants, discos, and open-air theaters. Everywhere you looked, you'd find gardens filled with families coming together to enjoy spending time in nature. Women had a very visible presence in every place in society. It was common to see women owning businesses. It was a happy, if sleepy part of the world. I have fond memories of summers spent in Afghanistan, where the people are generous, the landscapes are breathtaking, and the food incomparable. I never would have expected the region to be plunged into the devastation and have all the world's eyes on it. Because of my love and concern for that part of the world as a new senator in 2010, and this is shortly after I was appointed, I proposed a study on the role of the Canadian government in supporting women's rights after ending combat operations in Afghanistan. The committee recommended that Canada make the advancement of women's rights a fundamental element of its approach to Afghanistan post-2011 by including women in peace negotiations and protecting their rights, offering additional training to Afghan security forces, holding perpetrators accountable for crimes against women, and making education accessible to all. In 2011, in 2010, I was concerned about what we're seeing, what is happening today. As someone who is from that region, who has studied history, I was concerned, and that's why I proposed that study. In 2011, also at the Interparliamentary Union, where Afghanistan is a member, I took the lead in drafting a report on the role of parliaments in assisting women and children's access to medical treatment, which resulted in the unanimous adoption of a landmark resolution. For the past 2 months, I have been receiving desperate emails from Afghans trying to flee Kabul and from Canadians concerned about their loved ones in Afghanistan. The emails detail the loss of gains we helped achieve in Afghanistan. The situation has become so dire that one Afghan woman threatened to harm herself if we are unable to expedite her family's visa application. And believe me, this was not from lack of trying. Unfortunately, I still do not know the outcome of our efforts in helping these families. The Canada-Afghanistan Friendship Group has been very active since January of 2021. As co-chair of the group, we have held several meetings with the Canadian ambassador for Afghanistan, Hassan Surosh. Our meetings provided us with updates on the peace negotiations in Doha, and we learned that women and girls were already being deeply affected by the pandemic. We also organized a virtual briefing open to all parliamentarians and ministers to keep everyone appraised of the situation on the ground. And also, as acting president of the Canadian group of the Interparliamentary Union, I updated my colleagues on the crisis in order to unite our efforts in supporting Afghan parliamentarians. Many Canadian organizations and advocates have reached out to my office in the past few weeks, hoping to share their stories, their recommendations for the Canadian government, and for suggestions for actionable practical steps. I agree, there's a growing need for solutions for Canadians wanting to help their loved ones overseas. We're already hearing reports of how oppressive the atmosphere has become. I also worry about the thousands of years of history, culture, and music that is under threat. In one neighborhood of Old Kabul, where the musicians traditionally lived and passed on their traditions through families, we are hearing reports of musical instruments being dismantled, of the silencing of voices that sung of the majesty of Afghanistan, of its mountains, rivers, and valleys. One story that really struck a chord with me, which is that of an ustad, a master in Kabul who buried his rabab. The burying of the rabab, for me, is a significant act. The strings of the rabab pulls at the heartstrings of everyone from that region. And for me, it signifies the bearing of the heart and the soul of Afghanistan. My fear is that the news cycle changes, the world will forget about Afghanistan again until violence erupts once more and the horror starts streaming through our TVs again. Already the story is beginning to fade from the headlines. Already the space that women had carved out in our society is disappearing. Already they are becoming invisible. How long before their plight fades from our headlines completely and they become invisible to us too? Thank you, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, very, very difficult times. And we're actually going to move from the one who's been in Canada the longest to the one who's been in Canada the shortest, I guess. But we're really honored to have Saber here, another physician, a former part-time instructor at the School of Medicine in teaching public health in Afghanistan. He was a technical health specialist and advisor to the Minister of Public Health there in projects even supported by Global Affairs Canada. He's had more than 15 years of professional experience in public health, management, leadership, teaching in government and non-governmental organizations. And now he has a master's in public health from St. Louis University in the US. He's authored a lot of research reports, technical reports at the Ministry of Public Health. He speaks English, Dari, Pashto, Hindi, and some basic Arabic and French. I don't think you're going to have to use all of those languages today, but anyway, really a great welcome to Canada, and it's a real pleasure to have you to give us the most up-to-date information, at least from last month, on what had happened recently in Afghanistan personally, but also with other contacts that you have there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arya, for the warm greetings and introduction. And I would like to thank the Senator for a remarkable speech. I agree on most of those points, and I will share my experience as someone who has recently arrived here. Alhamdulillah, our life is saved. I'm thankful to Allah and to the people and government of Canada for saving our lives and helping us evacuate. I know that there are a couple of thousands of people who have evacuated from Afghanistan, but I believe it's not enough. There are many more people who are desperate to leave the country, and as the Senator said, that she has received emails frequently. I have also been receiving emails and contacts from friends and those who have been working for the Canadian projects in Afghanistan. I would just give you a picture of what happened here on Ottawa, because I believe there are 53 families that have arrived in Ottawa, and I was the first who moved out into my house, and I rented a place, but it was not easy. But one of the most difficult challenges was to find a place and rent it, because the owners also have their own concerns, and they don't want to rent out their place to someone who is newly arrived and they don't have any credit. But there are other concerns as well. So most of the families are still at the hotels, and it's not easy for them to cope with the kids and be like confined to only 2 rooms. So it affects their mental health, and the process is a bit slow. But when we were in Toronto and we were working with the whole process was managed by Polycultural. They were working well, but we received several last-minute calls from them, and there were problems with their management team, and some employees were hired who didn't have any previous experience. I know that it's a challenge for a newcomer to settle in, and for me, I had a previous exposure to US, and I had lived there for more than a year while I was studying public health under the Fulbright program. So it was not very, very difficult for me to settle in. I managed to enroll my kids in the school. I got my driving license. I did all of my paperwork. I got my health cards. And I think that it was very helpful for me, and I will be happy to share my experience with the newcomers to get integrated into the community quickly. And I appreciate the efforts of the Pegasus Institute and especially Dr. Arya for taking this initiative. And I will be happy to help the Institute as a volunteer so that we can help the newcomers in their integration process in the community. There are several other challenges, like for people who don't speak English, they need an interpreter, and sometimes they lose the contents in the interpretation. They cannot navigate the map, they cannot navigate the country, and they don't know where should they go, how to get stuff from the internet. And all of the communication is via the internet. So some families who don't have access to laptops or to devices that can help them get connected to internet, they may also have problems. And another concern from the landlord's perspective is that we in Afghanistan have lived like 4 or 5 or 6 family members in 2-bedroom or maybe 3-bedroom apartments. But here it's expected that every kid should have his own bedroom, and it's not practical because the amount of the stipend that the refugees are receiving, it's not matching the needs for renting a larger house. So there are some challenges, but we need to tackle them one by one. And I'm happy to be part of this group and work as a team member and see how I can collaborate more practically with the team members. Right now, I have my kid in the school, recently enrolled, and I need to drop him at the school and bring him back because he's not on the bus yet. So I may leave a little bit earlier because his school gets off at 3:45, and I'm at the other side of the Barhaven, like near the Barnesdale and Green Bank. So it may take me like 45 minutes until I reach there. So I apologize for that. This was not in my control, and I hope that in the next webinars I will be there full time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sada. Yeah, and it's good that you're highlighting some of the challenges personally that you're experiencing that a lot of other people see. And I certainly see those experiences with trying to find a Dari interpreter right now is, I think they're worth more than the price of gold, it seems like. So there are many issues that we have with interpretation in our clinic, but we certainly understand. One of our other proposed panelists had a personal health emergency too, so couldn't participate. We'll move on next to Anushka. Anushka, I've known for, I don't know, 15 years or so, I guess, but we haven't really talked so much in those 15 years. And now we're together here. And Anushka has her PhD in public health from the University of Alberta, a master's in demography and health from the London School of Hygiene. And she's a qualitative researcher, also the daughter of our first panelist, senior research associate at the Center for Global Child Health at the Sick Kids Hospital, and now associate or assistant professor, I should say, at the Dalla School of Public Health at U of T. So Anushka has had a real interest in health and peace more generally in the AFPAC area, primarily, I think, for personal reasons, but now is a public health expert. So welcome, Anushka.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Neil, and the organizers for putting together this panel. And I would also like to thank the Pegasus Institute for having me today. And just to locate myself, like Neil mentioned, I am a global health researcher and I do research on humanitarian crises. And so I'm going to speak more about the public health impacts of conflict and humanitarian crises, and specifically focusing on women and children and adolescents. Before I go into some of the potential health issues that one should be mindful of and that I would like to discuss more detail, I wanted to give you a little bit of background about the public health system in Afghanistan. And this is important context for us to understand what potential impacts could be. So a lot of the health delivery that happens in Afghanistan is through contracting through NGOs. And so NGOs are subcontracted by the government to go into communities and to provide health services. Afghanistan has experienced a lot of improvements in child and maternal health from the early 2000s onwards. However, we have started to see in the last few years that some of these improvements are starting to plateau. And so some of the concerns that I would like to talk about when we are thinking about what potentially may be coming in the next few months is related to malnutrition and food insecurity. And one of the major concerns in Afghanistan pre the Taliban taking over was really stunting. There were high rates of stunting in Pakistan, high malnutrition in pregnancy. And we know that children and adolescents often experience worse nutrition in humanitarian crises than adults do. Also wanted to speak a little bit about maternal health. Afghanistan has a very high maternal mortality, which is about 638 per 100,000. Just to give you context, if we compare that to neighboring Pakistan, the rate there is about 140 per 100,000. So you can see that this is several fold higher than what we would see there. As this insecurity increases in the region, access to maternal health services also is disrupted, and access to things such as antenatal care can be disrupted, and access to contraceptives also is interrupted, and this may lead to unwanted pregnancies and also unassisted deliveries that could have severe health impacts for women and increase maternal morbidity and maternal mortality. It's also important to consider the mental health impacts of what is happening now on the ground. And so of course there is the trauma that has been experienced, but also we need to think about the intergenerational impacts that are experiencing. When we are speaking about Afghanistan, it is a country that has been in conflict for several decades now. So that could have intergenerational impacts on children that are born. And as Dr. Saber did mention as well, even after resettlement, there are concerns related to adjusting to new contexts, and some individuals may experience isolation, and this could also affect their access to mental health services. Now, immunization is also a key area of concern. And when we think about immunization, one of the key things that we speak about with respect to Afghanistan is polio. As you know, Afghanistan is one of only 2 countries in the world that still has wild polio. And so polio vaccination rates are important to keep up. And as of right now, the Global Polio Eradication Initiative has said that their efforts have not yet been disrupted, but we know that historically in the past, Taliban has been anti-polio. So it's still a little unclear what is going to happen in the coming months. We know that in 2018, there was huge disruptions across Afghanistan by anti-government elements because of concerns with polio vaccination being tied to concerns about like mistrusting it and seeing it as potentially being spies. And so that left about 3 million children without access to polio vaccinations. And we did see this huge surge in polio after that, which has now come under control. So now the number of cases in 2019 had jumped to 29, and in 2020 it jumped to 56. And this year it is far better at only 1, but it's unclear what will happen if polio vaccinations are again disrupted. And so when we're thinking about the barriers to care in these specific areas, there's of course concerns around infrastructure, and we are talking not just about health infrastructure such as medical institutions, but also road infrastructure, especially for those that may be living outside of major cities. And there's also issues around access to care with respect to health workforce. And so there has previously already been issues and concerns with the availability of female midwives and nurses. In Afghanistan, task shifting has been primarily used to deliver a lot of health services into rural areas. And that's where lay health workers are given some training to deliver a specific health intervention. With increased barriers around gendered mobility. There's a possibility that individuals will not be able to access health services in the same way that they were accessing then. And of course, there are also concerns by health workers about them being targeted. So many may not want to engage in the activities that they were engaging in before because they are concerned about their own personal safety. And related to that, there's also gendered barriers to accessing care as well for a lot of women. And this specifically relates to when we are thinking about maternal health care and antenatal care. This can be a large concern. Many families may also experience increased economic pressure and loss of income, which will affect the affordability of healthcare. And we've seen in other humanitarian crises, and more recently in Syria and Palestine, that can actually have disproportionate effects on young women, specifically female adolescents. And in Syria and Lebanese refugees, we've seen that there's increased adolescent marriage. And so there are concerns that even though families may experience economic pressure as a whole, that this may be disproportionately felt by some individuals within the family more than others. And perhaps one of the most pressing needs right now is also related to COVID-19. And as we know right now, Afghanistan has approximately 3 million COVID-19 vaccines that are set to expire because they don't have the human resources to get them into the arms of individuals. And this is specifically related to the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, that subcontracting is done through NGOs, and a lot of the funding has stopped since August. So although there are human resources on the ground and some commodities on the ground, there is not funds to be able to actually get people to deliver those commodities. And so those 3 million vaccines may just expire because there isn't the funds to be able to get individuals vaccinated. And I think I will stop right there. I know that we have a rich discussion coming, so perhaps I will save the rest for our conversation later. Thank you.
Thanks, Anushka. It's really good to get this background about health, particularly of women and children in Afghanistan. And so we've gone from your mother's introduction to the political situation and her history here, to Saber with his experience in terms of determinants of health, which all of you public health people are interested in. And now Kazim would like to talk more about health of Afghans, both in and outside Afghanistan, so in Afghanistan and in Canada a bit more, but also proposing some solutions. We're going to talk more during the roundtable about that. It's good also that we already have somebody who's made a comment in the Q&A, and I'd encourage people who are attendees to add more comments there. We've added Mary Jo Land, who may show her video in a little while. Mary Jo's engaged in peace work in Afghanistan, so when we have the more open roundtable type of thing, we'll have her and maybe one or two others. So Kazim, also a medical doctor and public health expert from Eastern Afghanistan. He's been a Fulbright scholar and has a master's in public health from George Washington University. He's worked across Asia and Africa and at the Afghan Ministry of Public Health. Worked on projects on HIV/AIDS, TB, and malaria in Afghanistan, since you have mentioned some of the infectious diseases that people are prone to. And recently, he's led the formation of what is now the Ottawa Coalition for Afghanistan, that is meant to work with Afghan Canadians to support Afghans inside Afghanistan and in Canada. He brings firsthand experience and knowledge with international development, global health, operating within challenging environments, and partnering for emergency relief in war zones and post-conflict situations. So welcome, Kazim.
Thank you, Dr. Neil, and I'm thankful to Pegasus Institute for giving us this opportunity to come together and talk about Afghans and their most pressing issues. Anushka has already talked a lot about the health challenges of Afghans. I will try to complement what she says. She said, although she was very comprehensive and detailed, and she did describe the real issues that the Afghans are facing in Afghanistan. So basically, roughly a month ago, Afghanistan was captured by force by an extremist, hardline extremist group called the Taliban. And with that capture, everything changed for Afghans, especially for Afghan women. I don't want to go into the details of the dynamics of why this happened and how this happened, but I would touch upon the challenge, the health challenges that resulted following the fall of Afghanistan to the Taliban, both for Afghans and also Afghans in Afghanistan, and also the Afghan diaspora here in Canada. Afghanistan had many gains over the past 20 years in its health sector. Let me give you an example. Back in 2001, there were 20,000 Afghans dying of tuberculosis every year. Now that figure has halved. It is a tremendous achievement. Similar achievements are there in maternal health, child health, and many other areas of public health and health systems. Health systems were rebuilt. Afghanistan, with the support of donors, primarily the World Bank, European Commission, USAID, the Global Fund, and other international donors, established a system which is called the Basic Package of Health Services. This basic package included all the basic services, including MNCH, which is maternal, newborn, and child health, communicable disease, non-communicable disease, including mental health. And almost 85 to 90% of Afghanistan was covered under this basic package of health services. But with the capture of the country by the Taliban, all the donors withheld their support for many reasons. And as a result, the Afghan health system collapsed. Now, Afghan populations are without health services. On the other side, their needs have increased. As Anushka described those in quite detail, the mental health needs have also increased tremendously. That is the situation there. In terms of the health of Afghan Canadians or those Afghans who are resettling in Canada or seeking refuge, there are also huge challenges. The fall of Afghanistan was a big shock to most of the Afghans here in Canada. Their health, they were in a kind of a distress because of this fall, because they have emotional attachments, they have families there, and it's their country. So it's natural that they will go into deep distress. Their need for mentally, including myself, I was also in need of mental health support during the past 1 month. So, and for the resettled refugees or those who are coming new to Canada, they don't know the health system of Canada. They don't know how to find a family physician. They don't know how to seek physical and mental health services here. So that is another big challenge that the Afghans here in Canada are facing. Now, I know I'm running out of time, but I just want to mention something, and that is that unless the root cause of this problem is addressed, and luckily we have the senator here, I wanted to bring her to her attention. The solution is, yes, we will try our best, but the fundamental solution is political. Canada can and should play a very important role in putting pressure on the Taliban, who are now controlling the country, to have full regard to the human rights, and health is a human rights of all Afghans, including women, not on their terms, but on the terms of, but in line with the international humanitarian law, international human rights law, and the UN Declaration for Human Rights. Canada is an important player of international community. They have the power to really put pressure on the Taliban and their sponsors, whoever they are. I don't want to go into that detail. So that is one thing. And in terms of humanitarian support, I believe Canada can again play an important role. We remember in 2005, there was an earthquake in Pakistan, which really saddened all of us. It was a very, very shocking incident that happened. Roughly 1 million or so Pakistanis were affected. Now, roughly 20 millions of Afghans face acute starvation, hunger. So that is the situation. That's the scale and scope of the situation. I think not only the government of Canada, but the civil society organizations here should try to mobilize as much funds and support, and the government should match that. So there is a tremendous need, and I think a lot can be done. And also, finally, I just wanted to commit that Ottawa Coalition for Afghanistan will be a key partner of this newly formed group. We will do whatever we can to help our own Afghans in Canada and in Afghanistan. Thank you.
Thank you, Kazim. Yeah, so I should mention that we're a bit of, we may not represent the whole spectrum of people here from Afghanistan. I think it'd be very hard to represent that. And so the opinions that we express will be very personal. Our next speaker is going to try to address more than 40 years of conflict in 5 minutes. So Sadiq has one slide here. Sadiq, as I mentioned, practiced medicine in Afghanistan and was an activist against the Soviet invasion and spent 4.5 years in prison because of that. Came to Canada, studied epidemiology, worked at McMaster, helped develop a project with the Center for Peace Studies at McMaster in the late 90s, leading peace education projects with Afghan civil society in Pakistan and Afghanistan, and started to do a PhD at U of T, but with the fall of the Taliban, ended up doing 18 years of consultancy in Afghanistan, helping with systems reform in education, promoting a culture of peace and reconciliation. And as I mentioned, he takes pride in a school textbook on life skills that was meant to be used in all Afghan schools as of 2004. So I'll leave Sadiq then to give us a bit of history, and then we'll move into the roundtable portion and including some of your inputs and questions in the Q&A part. So feel free to add those anytime. Thanks, Sadiq. Oh, you're still muted, I think.
Thank you very much, Honorable Senator Neil, Mr. Chair, and very dear colleagues. I would like, a few things were reminded to me as I was hearing from my colleagues that I was a doctor of tuberculosis at some point in Kabul before immigrating. And I was a primary healthcare doctor in a village before I immigrated to Pakistan. And then all the way back in 2007, I was a part-time helper with an HIV high-risk identification and I worked with the colleagues of, maybe former colleagues of Kazim. Worthy of mentioning that I worked as a doctor in Peshawar, very nice years, and for a while in Islamabad. And to go around to the rest of the region. In 2007, I was a government representative in India, in Delhi, working with the ministry. I spent 50 days there with the Ministry of Social, I think, Human Resources. And the textbook is still in use. I found out it was in use for all those years. Life skills, Maharatay Zindagi, Dujwan Maharatuna. Now, I want to tell you two quick stories. First story has a more a moral issue in an implication in the second story. I have been advocating since 2006 that Afghanistan has a bigger domestic problem, an unresolved civil war. It's intertwined with regional politics and they need to be addressed together. But as you see in this picture, I will try my mouse there. If you look, pay attention to the part A and B, we have A and B taking turn, different versions of them, as if the country is hostage, taken hostage by a few warring groups. I mean, in this era, that's 10 or maybe 13 years, if we add the 2 years after withdrawal of Soviet and the 1 year before the Soviet came, there was a party A dominated by one ethnicity and a party B. Party A kicked out party B, and they both then were fighting against another faction that was mostly several groups of A, B, C, D of Mujahideen with various ethnic identity, not very clear in the beginning, but later. If you look at quickly at another era, that's the era of first part of the Civil War, we had another party B with similar to this party B with an ethnic dominance that took it all and kicked out party A. And so the third one is then we have Taliban. So this is 96 to, again, kind of can be labeled as party A. And the Northern Alliance Plus, the faction B, was kicked out and oppressed. And then we have the 20 years where kind of the party B was in control, even though there were, I mean, international community was present, several countries, but still the temptation to keep monopoly of power and economics and the wealth and culture, that was the pattern. So the trend is all kind of the same. Now we have party A again. This party A is not the same as that party A or this party A of Hikmatyar, but it has, it's a dominated party by one ethnicity and it wants to take it all and we don't know what's gonna happen. Now, what we should pay attention here is that there is one party trying to take it all, oppress others, have very strict, biased beliefs about the other, so biased in their judgment, lack empathy, forget about compassion and sympathy. So any of these party A's and party B's, why they are failing, because they don't have the mental capacity to include others and to create a win-win scenario for all. They only see their own prides, they only see their own gains, they only see their own victimization, they only see their own legitimate rights and even illegitimate, but they do not see easily and acknowledge the legitimacy of the other. That's, my friends, one trend going all the way for 43 years now. I recounted, it's 43. Story number 2 is, and this era, 1978 to 1992 or 1989, so we had the NATO and Soviet blocs, and we had regional Pakistan and India, as countries taking sides in these two, with these two Afghans. So there, that interface between the Afghan parties, these are parties, these are factions, they are not people. They do not represent people, they are not selected or elected by people, and they do not represent the interest of the people. Mostly self-interested. Like, these guys wanted progress. Thank you very much. These guys were a bit more open, not in this stage, but here. But still they didn't want to lose the full control. They won it, and they wanted to kick out the other one and do not even recognize any legitimate rights of the other. I mean, they wouldn't see, you can really, I saw it. This is my firsthand experience that, and as a peace builder and peace educator, I saw that the psychology of hostility, first described very well by a psychiatrist, he must be alive still, Aaron Beck, is really applying there. You lose the compassion, you lose the empathy, you lose the, you become biased, you see the enemy or the other as a whole homogeneous one, and then you want to remove, get rid of them. You want to eliminate them all. That's how it functions in all genocides. If you look at Rwanda, or if you look at Second World War. So that psychology, unfortunately, has not gone away here. Now, going back to the 1992-96, we had India, Iran, and Russia. We had Pakistan and Saudi working with these groups, supplying them with arms and weapons and money and political support. And this stage when A1, so we have the same continuing. And now in the 20 years, 18 years of which I was in Afghanistan, we had NATO, obviously, and we had India and Iran close to the government. And we had Pakistan and Russia kind of away on the side, but Pakistan with their friend, India, India's friend playing through the government. So India was seeing itself through the government of Afghanistan and quite happy with that. And Pakistan would be seen and beside the warriors. Now we see these different levels of Pakistan, the highest, and then China and Russia and Iran. This is a nice, interesting coalition that is going to last or not, but I think it worked against the United States. So they are happy that they work together on the cause of Afghanistan. That's for the first time these countries would work together, but I hope they will use this opportunity to continue working together. In conclusion, as you see, the nation has been taken hostage, A and B and B and A and B and A. And as I explained, so many of them in their times, some of them very corrupt, most of them rigid-minded, none of them, it's very sad, capable of finding a win-win solution. No leader from party A would have the mental capacity to tell you, this is the Afghanistan I see that I will develop or I will create. And this is how the rights of this group and that group and that group will be achieved and attained. And this is how the regional balance I will keep. No, the region also guilty. The region has not shown a leadership. There are all kinds of rivalries everywhere. You don't have to fight your fight in another people's land and nation. The objectives, many of them legitimate, can be achieved through cooperation. Pakistan has a lot of legitimate concerns about what's going on in Afghanistan. So does India, so does Russia, so does China, and the US and Europe. They are all legitimate, but the minds are maybe so military intelligence or colonialistic that there is only one way that they know, the easiest and the worst way, and that's the invade and or have a group and take power by force and take it all, and wrong calculations. It has not worked every time. It's not going to work this time. Last, this is for us. We are worried about the refugees. We are worried about the safety of the people. But the rest of the millions of people are there, and I see two, one need and one opportunity. The need for a national reconciliation is bigger than before. I was part of a peace group. I tried. I mean, a government established peace commission. I tried to to get a buy-in for a national reconciliation approach. It didn't work out. So people, it's like this. People would see each other's rights. People would let them provide opportunity. So they listen to each other's pain. They listen to each other's fears. They listen to each other's grievances, what they lost, and look at each other's poverty, look at the human face of each other. And then let them focus on pragmatic issues. Okay, how can we work together to recover the economy, and how can we keep a balanced relationship? We don't have to force. I see that take the responsibility as an Afghan. It's Afghan's problem that drags other countries to Afghanistan. If only, so you have divided and incapable leaders, other people will lead your country.
Yeah, thank
so,
you.
The last is that the regional cooperation. I think the time for diplomacy is starting, and time for helping the region to cooperate on a temporary cause of Afghanistan. We can see that on Afghanistan, they could cooperate, Iran and Pakistan and Russia. I think that's the best start.
Okay, thank you, Sadiq. Yeah, that was a lot of information in a short period of time. And as I said, this new group that we're forming, Canadians for Afghan Health and Peace, we have people with a number of perspectives, but we want to look at things within Afghanistan, getting people out who are not safe, or keeping them safe within Afghanistan. When people come to Canada, making sure that they have the resources that they need in terms of their own health and peace. And so this is now the time for our roundtable with, and I would like to add some of the other people here. Actually, Saber has agreed to be on the phone, so I think I see his number must be the phone number here as he went to pick up his son from school. The first couple of questions really relate more to things in Canada. And we've got a couple of other people, I think, who can, we saw Mary Jo can add her voice, and I think Bashir is a person who might be able to add to some things here, because Bashir has been involved with employment of people. But I'll read a couple of questions from the chat for our panelists to comment, since many of you are working on things. So the second question relates to getting people who are students and scholars getting visas to come to Canada. And there are many people who remain at high risk who have to hide. And I think that many people on the panel have connections with people like that. Is there a way of getting the federal level to prioritize helping these people? And then the first question related to challenges in terms of people settling here. And we heard about some stuff in terms of how Afghans might want to live, and affordability of having a bedroom for each child, and issues with landlords refusing to rent to people, and difficulty with people who can't communicate in English. So I think questions about the social determinants of health, and a lot of people liked those questions. So why don't we bring those to our panel first? So issues of getting people out of Afghanistan, and I might maybe have the senator perhaps lead in that discussion. And then I'd actually like Bashir maybe to be the first one to talk about some of those other issues with rent and other things, and Kazim may want to also address that, and Saber maybe expanding from his personal experience, if that's okay. So Senator, if you could address trying to get out scholars and students from Afghanistan.
Thank you. It's been a really interesting, discussion. Here I have to express a sense of frustration. It's been really, really slow. In my office, when we try to help people who were reaching out to us, and some of the cases were really desperate, and we forwarded the names to IRCC. We have not gotten an update. I know the government says they're going to bring 40,000 people, and I know some have arrived already. But more than that, there's not much I can say, except that we continue to push that, people whose lives are in danger need to be brought out. Unfortunately, Canada has been missing a little bit in action. And I was very disappointed that the day Kabul fell was the day that we called a federal election, because then everything has just, took a backseat. We were so consumed with the election because Parliament was dissolved. And, as co-chair of the Friendship Group of Canada and Afghanistan, we would reach out to people. We would have meetings. In the past, we had, even before the fall of Kabul, when we were talking to the parliamentarians in June, we had one meeting specifically with the women parliamentarians. And there was that sense there that something is happening, and they were pleading for help. So, Canada does have a stake in Afghanistan. We lost young men and women in Afghanistan. We have a very vibrant Afghan diaspora who has contributed much to Canada, and we want to see the diaspora expand. Unfortunately, we are moving at a very slow pace. And once Parliament is back, I can ask for meetings. And I'm also hoping that the coalition in Ottawa would reach out to me, and maybe we can have some meetings there and we can discuss how we move forward and how we work together. So I don't know, I'm sure you can sense my frustration. At some point we were trying to, my colleague from New Zealand reached out to me about helping the female soccer team. And we weren't getting any answers. And I'm happy to say that they have settled in Portugal. Portugal took them in. I think other countries have moved a bit faster than we did. Our ambassador wasn't there. Ambassador had been on leave since July, if I'm correct. So, I don't know what to say to you except express my sense of frustration. But I'm hoping we will be back and we can, keep questioning and answering and keep pushing.
Yeah, we're hoping as a group that given the various organizations that people belong to and connections with Afghan Canadians, there are also other advocacy organizations that we're aware of, including war veterans who are really interested in the people who help them. So they often have more influence with our government. So we're hoping that we can get people out at risk. And I see that we've got a few questions about the international situation, but maybe Bashir, maybe you could introduce yourself and talk about some of the settlement type issues that people were asking about here. I don't know if you can turn on your video, but I think you should be able to turn on your audio. Bashir?
Yeah, are you hearing me now?
Yeah, you could have video if you would like, so people can.
Okay, let me see, where is that? Things are a bit. Anyway, let me start talking and continuing to activate that. Good afternoon, everybody.
Yeah, actually, you won't be able to do your video, I've just heard.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, sorry. But yeah, please introduce yourself and what you've done in the past. And
good afternoon, everybody. This is Bashir Shabaz. I'm an Afghan national, currently living here in Kitchener. I came to Canada in 2022 and working at an non-profit organization, Reception House, Waterloo region as of March 2007. Currently, I used to work as a case manager, dealing directly with refugees, connecting them to services in the community. And as of 2018, I'm managing an employment program here that is focused on finding employment for refugees. The challenges faced by the newly arrived Afghans in our region, to be honest, it is not unique to Afghans or refugees coming here. are faced with the same challenges. But the situation with Afghans is unique, given the circumstances that they were brought out from the country and the resettlement process they started here. Based on the latest update that I have, we have received about 120 Afghans to Waterloo region. The majority of them, the absolute majority, are still in the hotels. As my colleague mentioned, the same situation that is in Ottawa. I think the situation with the housing is everywhere. Our housing team has been trying to find housing for these newly arrived refugees, but the shortage of the housing, the rent, it has been a challenge. And kind of there is a chain reaction. A lot of other problems kind of related to housing. If people are still at the hotel, they need to deal with the kids because kids are not allowed to go to school because they don't have the permanent addresses and all those things. However, in some places, to be honest, my experience, I have a nephew who is living in London, exactly the same situation, who used to work for the British Embassy. They are still in the hotel, but their kids were taken to school. He told me that has been a huge relief for the parents to deal with other issues. Here, unfortunately, there is a red tape that unless you have a permanent address, you have a proof of that, kids cannot be registered in the school. That's one of the major problems that can lead to others. The employment-wise, I think one of the major issues would be managing the expectation of the newly arrived. There are other settlement issues to be dealt with before we start talking about the employment. Obviously, housing, schooling for both parents and for the kids and so on. I have talked to a few of my countrymen who came here, who used to work as managers, supervisors in held different positions there. The issue is that they are having a lot of excellent transferable skills, but they need to be given a very clear picture of the employment pathways here in Canada. A lot of positions that they used to work at back there, those positions don't exist simply here. We need to kind of build on their strengths. The office is planning to arrange a group session with them. I will be there to talk to them next week about our experiences and the pathways to employment to help them make informed decisions. I know that a few of them that I've met, they are talking, oh, I want to get my master's degree, and all those things are good here, but you need to kind of be objective about the situation and relate the education they are planning to get to the labor market and all of their family dynamics, all those things that I want to talk to them. So far, housing is a priority for all of us here working. Healthcare, as Dr. Neil has been great, offering excellent services for so many years, taking care of thousands of refugees here. Thank you, Dr. Neil. I want to really thank you on behalf of not all Afghan refugees, all the other refugees. I've been working with you since 2011, that we started the refugee clinic. It has been excellent. I think finding a family doctor is another issue. I have talked to one of our Afghan doctors who is practicing here in Kitchener, Dr. Mirwais Sayar. He just expressed readiness to start accepting those with the high needs. He told me just talk to the office, put together a list of those with high needs, pregnancy, high blood pressure, and all those things that medical-wise they need more urgent care. We are working on that. He showed readiness to accept them, but one doctor cannot solve the issue. Then we have, as Dr. Neil knows, $50,000 in the Waterloo region who don't have family physicians. It would be a huge issue for the system at all. Thank you.
Thanks, Bashir. And unfortunately for healthcare, often refugees are at the back of the line for people because they don't know the system.
Yeah.
And I think that people find it more challenging, sometimes dealing with particular issues that people will have, not having the language, having people who might sometimes be late for different reasons. So with a lot of marginalized populations, it is difficult. I'm not sure whether Sabir, I think he's a phone-in listener, I'm not sure whether he can actually talk. That was something that I didn't think about there. Yeah, Camille, you could let me know if somehow we can get him as because it'd be nice to hear from him from his own direct experience. But anybody else want to address these issues in terms of the resettlement types of things and bringing people at risk, Kazim and others?
Dr. Neil, I just wanted to briefly add to what the Senator said and other colleagues. In as much as we appreciate the government's efforts to expedite the ongoing current applications, we share the frustration. Scholars, I think, are probably quite back in the line. The priority is the families of those who are currently in Canada and their families are stranded in Afghanistan. The speed is so low, so slow that they're very much frustrated. I know a group of some 250 Afghans, most of whom are women, and their children, husbands, wives. They are stranded in Afghanistan. As of now, nothing has been done for them. So from our side, we have been, I have been in touch with our ambassador, our colleagues here, Afghan community here. But I don't know, for some reason, nothing concrete is happening around the 20,000 resettlement commitment. I really don't know what can we do. Everyone has been, pushing hard, making noise in the media, but nothing is happening. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Apparently you can unmute yourself if you wanted, Saber, to add to the things, both for the people trying to, the scholars who need to get here and others, as well as addressing the issues of resettlement here. Saber, can you unmute yourself, or maybe if you can hear us? If not, I'm going to move on a little bit. We do have some very touching comments and questions, and I don't know if I can really repeat that from Maliha. I'd encourage everybody to read her comments about life under Taliban control and what she has seen people facing. And I don't know what we will be able to say in terms of response. So now I think you can now unmute yourself now, Sabu, because it has you muted, but has you as a panelist. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, we hear you.
Thank you, Dr. Arya. I agree with your comments and comments of Dr. Kazim. And I propose that under the leadership of Senator Atullah John, we reach out to the IRCC and request for a meeting and ask them why the process is so slow and why is it taking so long, even for those who have received confirmation of evacuation. There are a number of people who are in contact with me. They have received confirmation for evacuation, but they couldn't evacuate because the airport was so crowded and no one could cross the security checkpoints inside the airport during the last few days of a collapse. Apart from the other issues that we mentioned regarding the challenges for these, I think it's a great opportunity for them to be patient and to make sure that things will happen, but they need to work with their caseworkers. Like, they need to get more information and also be patient, and it will take a while until they get familiar with the system and they get used to the new environment, and not everything can be done at a very short notice. But since I heard that in London, it's like the permission was given for refugees to enroll their kids in the schools. Maybe we can request for a waiver for the kids to be enrolled in the schools, so that the parents can be relieved from the current hassle, and then like after they move into their permanent address, they can share their permanent address, and that's how the schools can have the confirmation. A letter from the organization that's managing the evacuation, the integration process here. I think that the Catholic Church services might prove helpful if the letter is sent to the Ottawa Board of Education.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We're going to shift gears a little bit. I want to move a little bit back to the international situation. I think we'll come back to the Canadian situation, because I think that people want to know what they can do and the communities can do to help. And I think that both within Canada as well as overseas, people want to know about vulnerable groups, whether it be women, for some LGBTQ people, so others who are particularly vulnerable in Afghanistan. But I want to move to Dr. Khan's question that is listed as being answered. So Uzma Khan is a doctor from Pakistan who's a world expert on tuberculosis, has consulted with the WHO on TB programs in Afghanistan, and she's talked about issues related to resources, managing IDs, managing ID. And so I just wondered if Anushka, you might actually be able to address some of those issues. So you can talk about TB in particular, but other things and vulnerable populations, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Yeah, I think that I commented back to Dr. Khan with respect to female health workers. She very rightly pointed out that there may be barriers to female health practitioners operating in different health institutions, and then what will be the downstream impacts of that on different groups accessing care. And it will have severe implications on individuals, especially accessing any SRH services or maternal health services. And with respect to vulnerable groups, we really do need to focus in on the fact that women are a specific vulnerable group, but also when we're thinking about different sort of displacement situations that are going on, individuals that leave the country as refugees in some ways have more available to them in terms of sort of protections, but internally displaced persons are particularly vulnerable because although they have left their home city, and many times that means that they no longer have access to the economic opportunities that they had in their home city or hometown, they still don't have any sort of protections in terms of global commitment to provide any type of services. So we do need to really think about IDPs in Afghanistan and the health services that they may be needing. And within the group of displaced individuals, and that's including IDPs and refugees, it's also important to think about children and adolescents. About 49% of refugees worldwide are under the age of 18. And every year we have about 75,000 unaccompanied children and adolescents as refugees. So there are specific groups that would be particularly vulnerable, and also the process of displacement can make them vulnerable too. And as Neil highlighted, LGBTQ plus individuals may also experience additional persecution because of their orientation. So those groups, we should be paying attention to what's happening with them and really focusing in services and resources in that way.
Thanks, Anushka. Anybody else on the panel who wants to address any of these issues before we move on to the next?
Dr. Neil, just briefly, thank you, Dr. Uzma. I'm very happy to have you I was also a part of the effort against tuberculosis in Afghanistan. I was leading the Global Fund program under the Ministry of Health back in 2006 and 8. So yes, I mean, with the catastrophic change that has happened in Afghanistan, a plethora of problems has showered on Afghanistan's health sector, especially communicable diseases. Back in those days, 2006, 2007, we estimated that there is a need of $100 million for fighting TB in Afghanistan. So that was the gap analysis for for TB control. And now that all the donors have stopped funding, you can imagine the severity of the situation. In a time when we need $100 million to where we have nothing now. And of course, the health systems, general health system has also, I mean, at the verge of getting collapsed. So yes, I mean, there are serious issues. What we can do in Canada, I think the only thing we can do is do advocacy, lobbying for political pressure, plus fundraising to at least meet the essential medicines needs in Afghanistan.
Now, I actually wanted to go to Maliha's comments, which were really, as I said, very touching. And so we've actually given her permission to actually express them directly. And then I wonder whether Sadiq and others would like to try to address that. But Maliha, did you want to share your feelings about what is happening in Afghanistan right now and how it's affecting you?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for giving me the chance to express myself through this meeting. And yes, during the Taliban, I was in Afghanistan, and the Taliban killed my parents in front of me, as well two of my sisters, and I was the oldest family, with three sisters and one brother. All they were under age of 12. And I was around 15. And I was have to work outside. And many times the Taliban beat me up for no reason, although I had the burqa, everything. But same thing, I'm very concerned, not about women, about everybody. They beat up everybody, the children, the young men, women. They're very brutal and aggressive people that I think never in the world happens this type of government or tyranny. And I'm very happy from government of Canada that for their humanitarian help that bring a lot of Afghani people. And also I'm proud of the government Canada. It was the first country that declared that we would not recognize Taliban at all. Even previously they were in control. Canada didn't recognize them. It is a great thing to hear from here. I'm very happy for those people that they arrive here and they use this opportunity, the security, freedom, peaceful country, but they might face some other challenges that, as we mentioned, the shortage of houses, sometimes they will have issue to find a family physician, language issue, these things. I hope as everybody, as much as possible, whatever they can do to support these newcomers, not only Afghani, but anybody who they will arrive new here, they really need a lot of attention and a lot of help.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, I know the senator has her hand up. I don't know if you wanted to follow along with this, or did you want to address some of Maliha's comments as well as make a comment about other things, Senator Salma, and then we'll have Sadiq after.
Thank you. I first of all, I want to applaud Maliha for sharing her difficult story with us. And, just say, I mean, when I think of what she's been through, I can't even imagine. Maliha, thank you for being here and, telling us the story. It's important to hear stories like yours, which tell us the reality of the ground when the Taliban are in power. Discussing the refugee issue again in the Human Rights Committee, I did a study on the resettlement of Syrian refugees. And we went and spoke with refugees in Toronto, in Montreal, and in Ottawa. We listened to them firsthand, and we listened to what worked and what didn't work. So maybe and there were recommendations that were made to the government. So that was a very successful program. So Canada does have something in place where they can bring the refugees and work with them. And the one thing that I have to mention is that what we learned from the study is the refugees that came that were government sponsored had a harder time, adjusting. But the refugees that came and that was sponsored by a family, or a church group or any other group, but because they had that personal level, somebody there to help them, teach them, because you come to Canada, you really don't know anything. And I mean, that's not only the refugees. I myself, when I came to Canada, we come from a different society to come here just to learn. So if there's somebody there to help them, guide them, like simple things like taking the children to school, helping them with their visits to the doctor, just getting them a sense of how to establish yourself in the Canadian society. So that was helpful. I'm hoping that we move a bit faster. I like the suggestion of maybe asking the IRCC for a meeting once Parliament resumes. I could we could put that forward and let me see what they say, because we did ask them for another meeting regarding another issue, and we were told, well, because of the election, it will be difficult for us to meet. So I like that suggestion. And together maybe we can just ask for a meeting and find out what's happening, because like everybody else, I am also frustrated by the slow pace that's moving, but I also understand that it's not easy to get people out of Afghanistan right now, and you have to have help from other countries.
Thank you. Dr. Weera.
Thank you again. What I heard is heartbreaking, but it is true. These are the people, the current Taliban are totally in the wrong job without any accountability. And also they can get away with stuff, and lack of funding, which is somehow positively related to if they changed, if they allowed a professional government. I worked with the Minister of Higher Education, the guy who just handed over his seat to a new Talib who became the Minister of Higher Education. I remember we were working on reforms, how universities should create managers and leaders for the economy and the country economy and for social development. Now that guy have no idea. You hear in the media the mental capacity and the experience and the attitude of many of these ministers. Then you hear things like, why would women need to work? Why instead they don't get married? Or there are some very sad and appalling phrases used, like a woman who is not covered is like a chocolate without cover, or a melon that's open. These are ministers talking in the media. So you can, or another one saying that we are the type of regime that is the only one and the first one and the last one, and the world will follow us because we are going to save humanity. So with that level of naivety, what do you expect? The only strength this group has compared to its rival warring factions is that this group can work to bring security to individuals and to their properties, and they are not corrupt yet. Other than that, like, those are the functions they are good at. Other than that, the way they think, their values, their beliefs are so backwarded that does not match the requirements of basic jobs, and let alone the rights of men and women and children and the future of the country.
Thank you, Sadiq. Any other comments on this as we move into our last half hour, which I think we want more solution focused, and I think people want to know what ordinary Canadians can do, whether they be politicians, government officials. Let's look at solutions in the next little while. Bashir, did you have something you wanted to say? I just saw your hand sort of up.
No, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else who wants to comment on things up until now?
If I may, Neil, I just want to echo what was discussed, but add something about regular meetings with the IRCC. So two things. One, if these meetings are periodical, regular, as much as they are needed. And two is if all parties, all groups are somehow represented or included that work for Afghans, that work with Afghans, a stronger voice, one voice will be less confusing and more powerful.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so now let's start thinking about solutions, what we can do, and with this group that's forming, that's meant to be a bit of a coalition of efforts. With maybe we could also talk about different groups that Fawad, who was going to be part of this discussion, has numerous connections to. And again, please feel free to add more things in the Q&A section for those who aren't panelists. If you've got things that you think should be addressed, or points, if you've got responses to our panelists. Should we do just a little bit more of a go around, that beginning with Senator Salma, Kazim, Anushka, Sadiq, and then maybe you could also talk about your own organizations and efforts in the past and present, and perhaps also even thinking about personal stories, if you're able to tell those about people that you know at risk in Afghanistan, in transit, in Canada, if you would like, and in ways that the help that you need, and how we might look at solutions. So Senator Salma, I know this is a big question I put out to everybody, but just want to give you a chance to talk about those.
I see Bashir had his hand up, so I don't know whether he wants to speak before me. He has his hand up.
No, thank you, Senator. I think it is just that the technology thing. I click on it to lower it. Okay.
Why don't you speak, Bashir, and I can go after you.
No, I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It is a difficult question. I'm still in touch with some of the parliamentarians on WhatsApp, and she keeps sending me messages that things are really bad. And again, I wish I could help. I am trying, and I'm trying to push as much as I can. It'll be a bit better. Again, it might sound like a broken record. Once Parliament comes back, we're sitting in Ottawa, and we can do all this work. But anyone, please, if there's any issue that you want to highlight, you want me to help you in any way, if you have any ideas how we move this forward, please reach out to my office. I'm available. I answer all my calls. I personally have submitted some names that I felt were really people who really needed help. We have not heard anything. We have, again, that's frustration. Let me know what's happening. I know that you have a lot of, a lot of people have submitted names. A lot of people have submitted family names. But so just let us know. We're not getting that sense. So I think maybe a little bit of a push is needed, which we can do. But I'm happy to be part of a group as long as we work within this group, of trying to help people come here. I personally can push just a little bit, but ultimately it's the IRC that takes the decision. If Parliament was functioning, we could have called the Minister of Immigration for a meeting as the Canada Afghanistan Friendship Group. Unfortunately, once Parliament is dissolved, everything gets dissolved. So we'll have to form that group again, and then we can do that. I'm happy to move at that, at a fast pace. My office, my staff is on this call. We can do that. But again, once we're in Ottawa, and to tell you truthfully, I don't know when that will be. My sense is maybe early in the new year. But I'm hoping that things would have changed by then.
Thank you. Kazim.
Thank you, Dr. Neil. I would suggest that this group and the partners of this group do three things. The problems are many. I think it'd be good to prioritize. So prioritization is my first recommendation. Second is expand this partnership and coalitions, join forces, join hands. And thirdly, continue meeting with the policymakers, the senior government officials, with the help of Senator Ataullah Jan, if she can help us. So in terms of prioritization, I would suggest that, not much can be done, especially under current political circumstances in Canada. But at least if we can sort of push the government, urge the government to prioritize a few groups of people, for example, and like really effectively focus on this, that will increase the effectiveness of our collective effort. And that would be focus on the families of those immediate or extended families of those who are in Canada, but their families are in Afghanistan or in the neighboring countries. Secondly, simplify the processes. Those people who have been able to flee Afghanistan to Tajikistan, Pakistan, India, other countries. Now the requirements are so heavy for them. Let me give you the example of India. There are 25,000 Afghans living in India. For the past 10 years, they have been in touch with UNHCR to get the RSD, which is the refugee status determination. Only 7,000 have been given that. In Pakistan, it's so difficult. In Tajikistan, it is so difficult. So maybe if we can prioritize the families of those and also streamlining and making the processes simpler, convince IRCC to that end. And then, of course, the third priority would be, those women who are like, I know one woman who was leading women empowerment in Nuristan province. It's such a difficult province. And she was doing that. Now she's in hiding. I have been writing emails to her. I don't even know what happened to her. She was the director of women affairs. She never wanted to leave Afghanistan. And she wrote an email to one of my friends. So those kind of women leaders who have been very effective in empowering women, doing something for those. I know that, there may be priorities. Also, the problem is that the government of Canada doesn't consider the government officials as a priority. Although there are some senior government officials whose life is definitely at a serious risk. So I think, if this can be done in a systematic, organized fashion, I think we could, reach some impact.
Thank you. Anushka?
Great, thank you. So I think Dr. Kazim and my mom highlighted a lot of what can be done to get Afghans out of Canada. And so maybe I'll speak a little bit about what Canadians can be doing in the Canadian context. And I think what my mom highlighted with respect to the Syrian refugees about how having a support system actually meant that individuals had a better time adjusting. And I think that's a place where every Canadian, everybody on this call can actually put in time and put in effort to help individuals and families that are coming and that are arriving in Canada, help them learn the landscape, learn where to access resources, and just be that facilitation point. Because one of the things that we also need to consider, the one thing is coming as a refugee versus other types of migration, is that there's also this element of cultural bereavement. It's not necessarily a move that individuals wanted to make. Many people are forced to make this change. So there is that element of it as well. So being able to support is, I think, an important role that Canadians can play. And I also think that with respect to what we saw with the Syrian crisis is we saw this huge mobilization with respect to private sponsorship. And that's something that can also be done. People can form groups and get together with their groups from their religious institutions, their churches, their synagogues, their temples or mosques, and try to sponsor individuals to bring them over. And that would be a great way that support can also be lent. And the last piece that I really do want to highlight is that we do live in this world where there are these news cycles. And we have to keep sure that even when Afghanistan is no longer in the news cycle, that doesn't mean the needs of the people on the ground has necessarily changed. The needs may in fact be more dire. And so we need to keep sure that this is an issue that is staying at the forefront of people's minds and that we don't allow it to fade from people's awareness. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I think that we'll probably try to move to conclusion, maybe even, we had this session for till 4, but I'd actually like to conclude a little bit beforehand if we can. But Sadiq, any further comments or elaboration on things you've said before?
I want to emphasize 2 points already mentioned. One, for the Canadian government to review the processes because situations changed and the former or the previous or actually existing processes do not respond or they are not responsive. So that, and I also like the mobilizing the sponsorships. I don't have any idea how it can be done more systematically and in a wide range, but I think it's needed. What I want to add is also, once we are done a little bit progressing with the emergency issues, that what is that Canadian can do in Afghanistan and Afghan refugee camps and neighboring countries and so on. So those are the questions, and I put one of them to the Institute, the Pegasus Institute. Is that something we would like to consider? I know that health to peace is something that you mentioned a lot, and that's one of the frameworks that I really like because I see it's just matching the needs to peace within, peace with others, and the mental health, psychosocial. And there must be other institutions who are interested in global health issues. I mean, Anushka is leading one of the programs. And just to mention the additional one, like McMaster, you will be invited, Neil. The residents are interested to learn more about Afghanistan, the family medicine residents, and see what they can do. So there is something planned for them. So those are the type of not long-term, maybe intermediate term that we consider for discussion in the future.
Thank you. And for the audience as well as the panelists, we're hoping to just put this recording on our webpage as we have done other recordings. If you find that this would be useful in dialogue with other people, we're hoping to continue some work with this new coalition that we're creating. And Dr. Weera has suggested perhaps coming up with a 5-minute summary of clips. So I might try to see if we've got a student or if one of you has a volunteer student who would be willing to take some of these highlights in something that certain people who may have a shorter attention span than our great audience here, who's been around almost 2 hours. And I often have a shorter attention span. So if we're able to have some highlights for people to bring across our key points, and we'll develop action items. There's been a suggestion about doing an op-ed, and we did have one person on briefly from the media, whom I might reach out to again, just to see whether they have an interest in this story, both in terms of getting people here as well as the challenges of people within this country. So anything else before we conclude from the audience or from our panelists?
Neil, can I just say thank you to you and for including me in this conversation. I think it's a conversation that needs to be continued. You know, again, my office is open to everyone. We, you know, and the other thing is that we have to keep the people of Afghanistan in, you know, and as a woman, and some of the women that I met through my work in the IPU when I was head of delegation, I would always go to the, you know, the Afghan delegation and meet with them and sit with them and you know, talk to them, and that commitment that I saw, the interventions that I saw from the some of the female MPs of Afghanistan. You know, I would be so proud of them. There was this one young woman who, you know, I don't want to name, really young, like she was in her 20s, who came looking for me. And when I went to back to where the Canadian delegation was, they told me, Senator, there's a young female MP from Afghanistan. She's come 3 times looking for you. She wants to talk to you. So I went to speak to her, and I said, how can I help you? I'm just sharing a personal story of, you know, because this is what makes the conversation have more impact. And I went to her, I said, what do you want? She said, you know what, I want to stand for election for this committee. There's committees in the IPU, and this one was specifically dealing with peace and human rights, and how should I do that? So we spent a day together, and I said, you know, you can do this, and this is how you do that. She was running against an Australian, and the next day the Australian came and said to the Canadian desk, and she didn't know that I had been there helping and teaching and coaching this Afghan MP, and she said, oh my God, she's doing so well. That young MP from Afghanistan, she's going and she's talking to everyone and she's presenting herself, and I just kind of sat in silence. Well, she won the election. This young MP won the election, and the next time when the assembly met a year later, we meet twice a year, but a year later when they were having someone run for the chair to be the president of that committee, she ran to be president of that committee. And she was a very successful president. And I think of her, and I think of all the others where our paths crossed, who are living in fear now, and hope that we can help them. So let's not, the world's eyes turn away from Afghanistan. Already, if you see the news, you know, they've moved on. Let's keep the story alive. Let's continue to talk about it. And in any way you can bring, you know, one good way to bring pressure on the government is, now that the elections are done, you all have MPs who are elected. Reach out to them and say, can you please help us with this? Can you tell us what you're doing? So that's one other way to, you know, sort of put a little bit of pressure. Don't do it too soon. Some of the new MPs are just adjusting, but let's say, ask them, can you help me? You know, we're all public servants. We're there to help in any way we can. So, you know, I thank you for taking the time to do this. It's not easy, you know, and for everyone else who's been on this panel, thank you. And this is what will make us strong. Will make us strong when we have a group that's committed to the people of Afghanistan, and we continues to tell the stories that are coming out of Afghanistan. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, I think that we are really as human lives, we're a combination of stories, the interactions. So that's very important. Thank you for representing a challenge, giving a human face also to the ones that people have as family members and others, as people who need help within Afghanistan, as well as those of us who've pointed to things outside. It's nice to have that, even though your friend is in danger right now, but you also represent a very positive, hopeful sign. And I think there are hopeful signs that will come, and we just have to put pressure on those who can make a difference. So I want to thank each and every one of our panelists and our audience for attending today. We'll post this for people, and you're welcome to correspond with us at the Pegasus Institute. I'm sure that also the Ottawa Coalition and our new group will be happy to hear from people who want to engage with us. So thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.